Sharing best practice and education is a key driver to improve the situation. We talked about a little bit already this morning. And before we kick off the session, let me first introduce the expert of this session. He is Executive Director from the European Pain Federation, EFIC. Please welcome Sam Keenman. And Sam, before we really start the short presentations, let's ask you two questions. Here is the first one. Here's a quiz question, by the way. What is the percentage of teaching hours in an undergraduate medical degree dedicated to the topic of pain in Europe?
Hello? Sorry. It might be worth, sorry, can I just clarify for a second? It might be worth adding that this is the average. This is not compulsory in every country. This is the average of the responses.
If you want, you can use it. All right. I think we're almost done. And here is the result. That's what you voted. And 0.2% was the right answer. Let's turn to the next question, and maybe you were more lucky in the next for those who didn't vote the right answer. Education on pain prevention and management should be part of public health programs and be provided in the workplace and at school. This is an individual, so make your choice and pass it around. This is an individual question, so. Make your vote and pass the iPad around. All right. Let's see what you gave as a response. You strongly agree that it should be part of public health programs, and unfortunately, pain medicine is not taught as a special subject. Sam, let's kick off the session and call the panelists on the floor.
Okay. So our panelists for this session, we have, first of all, Dr. Emma Briggs. We have Professor Giselle Pickering and Dr. Usman Khan. So this session is on pain education. Since I joined the European Pain Federation in 2017, I've grown to know an awful lot about pain education that I never knew in the past. My background was in advocacy, and I assumed that within EFIC, advocacy would be the vast majority of what I do. But it turns out that education is a huge, huge component, whether that's assisting with examinations, assisting with the development of curricula, understanding the educational pathways of different professionals. And I'm glad to see that it became a component of the joint statement of SIP last year, and that we are going to elaborate on it in the future in terms of our policy recommendations. Though education is a difficult one when it comes to policy, the extent to which government has any kind of influence on medical education is in many ways limited. Definitely not controlled. It's in many ways governed by the professions themselves and by academia. So the way in which we can influence it is quite different to, for example, employment. But we've got some expert speakers today who know a lot about the influence of education either on medical professionals or on patients and society. So we'll start with Dr. Emma Briggs. Emma is an academic nurse from King's College London. Emma is very passionate about interprofessional education and is an expert on pain education, not just in the UK, but across Europe. And for EFIC, Emma Briggs is leading on our new curriculum on pain nursing, which was published recently and which will one day be elaborated into an examination. I'll call up Emma now.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. The next time you visit a healthcare professional, it is likely that they will have had very little education and training around pain management, as you've seen from that statistics around the medical curricula, but actually it's true for some of the other professions within health as well. I have no declarations of interest to declare. So let's have a look at the current situation. So within nursing, within Italy, the pain content has been mapped, and around 42% of their curricula contains pain in relation to the International Association of the Study of Pain curricula, which gives some outline topics to what should be in the curricula. Physiotherapy fares a little bit better at 74 hours within Finland, but the variations are still huge, and they can be between 50 hours and over 21 hours and 103 hours. You've seen the statistic from medical curricula. This is a study that we led with EFIC, and it was 0.2% of the curricula. 5,500 hours medicine has in its curricula, and only 12 hours is designated to pain itself. And it's also about the nature of that teaching as well, and it's often in lectures, and the reality is you will only retain 20 or 30% of things that you see and you hear. So you can take that figure down even further as to the content that people have and what they retain in terms of pain management. We conducted a study a few years ago which actually looked at the detail across the professions, and I wanted to share some of this data with you today. In the graph there, I mapped the professions, and I'm just going to move from the left to the right. So in dentistry, it's only 8 hours of pain education. Within medicine, they got to 13 within the UK, so very, very similar across Europe itself. Midwifery, only 6 hours. Nursing was just over 10. Occupational therapists were getting more pain education than the medics and nurses. Pharmacy was only 8 hours of pain education. And again, physiotherapy have done very well. That's in the blue, the light blue column. And they had a larger number of hours. You've kind of got to disregard the pink, although it's of interest. That is veterinary science. Okay, it's of interest because they do get more pain education than our healthcare professionals, but actually that's only 2 veterinary colleges within the UK, so we've got to think about that with caution. But ultimately, same sort of thing, we only have a few hours in the curriculum and less than 1%. Best practice, it actually needs to be formally recognised into the curriculum. We need our healthcare professionals to master pain. We need them to know about pain management, absolutely, but it is more than knowing, it is more than sitting in a lecture. And actually, they need to have the skills, they need to have the right attitude, and they need to have the competency in pain management. We need to help people do that, and they cannot do that sitting in a lecture of which they're only going to remember 20 to 30% of it. So it needs to be formally recognised within the curriculum. And what we say is actually education needs to be competency-based. So again, moving away just from knowledge and actually looking at people's skills, looking at people, can they assess, can they problem solve, can they decision make around to help people who are experiencing pain. And ultimately, we work together, so we need to learn together. Interprofessional collaboration improves health outcomes, it reduces health costs, and in cancer centres, more collaborative teams have shown to actually have better pain management with their patients. And there's a whole range of skills that we need our students to have in order to work collaboratively. And it's possible to do. These are our students in the photo. We educate 1,300 students each year, dentists, nurses, midwives, physios, pharmacists and midwives, all learning about pain together, all collaborating, all problem solving, all learning about their roles and other professionals' roles in order to help patients and keep the patient at the focus to improve their care. At a specialist level, there is much variation across Europe in terms of roles, in terms of competency, in terms of education that's available. So at EFIC, we have a suite of curricula which lay down the standards. This is what we expect of a specialist who is working at pain. Working in pain. So that again is competency based. It looks at people's skills, their attitudes. It ensures that they have the knowledge, the skills, the attitudes to effectively manage pain. And that currently is available for medicine, for physiotherapy, for psychology and for nursing. So how do we prioritise pain education? We need to strengthen our voice, and we do that by working together in platforms such as this. We need strategic partnerships at a national and at a European level, and to get patient groups and patient organisations together, to get non-pain specialist organisations together, our orthopaedic colleagues, our rheumatology colleagues. Together, we will have a stronger voice. We need to have advocacy at every possible level. As Sam said, it is very difficult sometimes to actually change things on a European level because the power often rests with academia. Often we have professional regulators who will stipulate what needs to go into the curriculum. So we need to have advocates at those levels to actually ensure that pain education is firmly in the curricula. And then finally, we need to provide standards of practice. We need to say this is the minimum. This is the competency that I need a nurse to be able to do, that I need a medic needs to be, I need a physio needs to be able to do. We need to be able to ensure that not only is that in the curriculum, that we assess it as well. We make sure, because assessment actually drives learning. And so we need to make sure that that those students, upon graduation, actually have the competency to effectively manage pain. So we need to prioritise pain education because it will help with the prevention of pain. It will help with management of pain. And so that the next time that you pitch up at a health professional's office or at a hospital, that they can adequately treat your pain because they're competent to do so. Thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Professor Giselle Pickering. Giselle is based at the University of Clermont-Ferrand. I hope I pronounced that correctly. My French is not particularly great. Giselle is chair of the EFIC Research Committee, though here today she is primarily responsible for the national SIP platform in France. And France is not just exceptional in this case because of the very strong SIP platform, but also because in some of the surveys that we've conducted, the research we've done, it seems that there is a strong position of France in terms of the compulsory education on pain for medical doctors. But I'd like to hear a bit more from Giselle about the broader aspects of pain education in SIP France.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm going to talk about the experience of the SIP platform in France. These are my conflicts of interest. So the societal impact of pain in France, we started with Dr. Aude Alfonsi from Gudenthal 2 years ago. It was quite a challenge because we really started from scratch. And in fact, we tried first to mobilize people around the idea of developing something around the SIP action in France. So we had the full support of the Pain Society first, of course, Grunenthal France, and also we managed to put around the table 11 associations, patients groups, associations of medical practitioners, health practitioners, politicians, and we discussed really the objectives of the project we could set up together. And in fact, we decided to focus on 2 specific areas because, as it was mentioned before, pain is very wide. And in France, we were very interested to look specifically at pain pathways for patients with pain, specifically with patients in cancer pain. And the other aspect was a bit wider on vulnerable patients, including patients, elderly patients, patients with intellectual disability, autism, and also cancer patients who might be vulnerable. So that was the scope of the position paper we started to write. And in fact, the aim was first to realize this position paper. We met quite a number of times, and then we published the position paper. We managed to have a national meeting, a national conference at the Ministry of Health, so we did quite a lot of advocacy work as well. And we disseminated in regional settings. We did that in Lyon and in Bordeaux, and we have another one in December with Aude in Marseille. So we're trying to disseminate now the position paper, and we work all the time with key policymakers. That's very important, and key important people who would help us on the political grounds locally. So the focus of the paper, I'm not going to talk on all the aspects of the paper, but one is very important, that's mobilization. We talked a bit about prevention, protection, but I'm not going to focus on that, but more about mobilization. And when we talk about mobilization, it's really a main focus on education and training. And this education and training is focused specifically in vulnerable patients and in pain pathways, specifically for cancer patients. So these are the main 2 aspects of the project. So we try to figure out the care networks, the care pathways, the breaking points in the pathways for patients where education could take place and where we could bring something. And now we try to have interactions between the national platform and regional platforms, local platforms, so that we could build up a real wide network in France on education. And we are really supported by the Ministry of Health now, because as Sam mentioned, we have a special curriculum on pain medicine. So we'll have specialists in pain medicine, because so far we did not have that in France, and it was really missing. And it was quite a bit difficult for medical people, nurses, physiotherapists, or doctors really to have jobs in France really specifically for pain. So it's going to be improving on that aspect. So now for these are just a few photographs of the different steps of our action, and we'll have a poster that's going to be at lunchtime as well. So now what do we want to do? We really want to foster and strengthen the links between the healthcare professionals, the patients, and the public. So that's the next step. That's what we plan to do next year. And to really strengthen that, we need really to work with patients, to provide them with good guidance about pain evaluation, because that's really one of the main themes of our action. So basically, now we want to implement the different strategies we're thinking of, not just nationally. It's going to go via the pain medicine curriculum that we are finishing to set up now in France, and also via conferences, discussions, and patients' involvement in the different tools and the different proposals we're going to make for improving pain care and pain assessment in France. So thanks very much. I just wanted to add just one point in links with the advocacy group at the EFIC level. The research committee under the heading of Bart as a president, with Thomas Stoller and with Andreas Kopf, who's leading the education group, are all willing to participate actively, of course, in the SIP world of to improve pain care in patients. So it's really a collaborative work that we are leading at the level of EFIC. Thank you.
Okay, our third speaker is Dr. Usman Khan, who is the Executive Director of the European Patients Forum. The European Patients Forum, if you're not aware, is the pan-European organization representing patients' organizations at European level. So I couldn't tell you how many members they have, but it's a very large, very strong organization. And I have to say it has the ear of the EU institutions, as far as I can tell, over the last few years. And I'll be very happy to hear what the European Patients Forum have to say about education that is targeted at a patient population. And just one last thing, the European Patients Forum is also another interesting organization in that it's got the acronym EPF, which has caused us no end of problems in that we have to maintain the acronym EFIC, even though we have the name European Pain Federation. But that's just a minor note and something for me to deal with. So Usman, if you can come to the platform.
Many thanks. Thanks for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. And I have to start with that apology that we've already taken EPF from 13 years ago. I'm very, very happy to be here, and many congratulations to SIP for 10 years of taking forward an issue that I think we all know needs to be right at the heart of health policy and practice. I am very much aware that I am actually the last speaker that's stopping you from what I would imagine now will be a much needed comfort break. So I will keep my words relatively short. As it's been explained, we as the European Patients Forum, we actually represent 74 cross-cutting European patient organizations, which could be the European MS platform, it could be Europadonna, the breast cancer patients organization, Alzheimer's Europe, it goes on. We basically represent 150 million patients with long-term conditions, and as you can imagine, for those 150 million patients living with their conditions, pain will be a significant factor for some, if not all of them. So what we know is that we're talking about two issues. We're talking about pain and the fact that pain needs to come on to health policy and practice in a way that SIP has been promoting and will continue to promote, but we also understand the need to look from a patient perspective at the issue of pain and more generally at health policy and practice, and also to meaningfully involve the patient voice in that process. It was very nice to see your answers to the question about should patients be more involved in research, and over 50% of you said that you should. I think that is marked and that is important, and I'd note Monica's point when she said 15 years of looking at needing to get the patient involved in research, in policy making. And we're moving from a position where one of my favorite, I say favorite quotes, the quote I heard once, doctor talking to a patient and saying, "My advice is to take my advice." And we know that we're moving away from that, and we're moving away from that paternalistic model. But to be able to do that, we're moving in terms of need. If you look at the medicine's life cycle alone, there are 41 different touch points where the patient voice and the patient perspective can be meaningfully introduced. That is an awful lot of different points. That's an awful lot in terms of expectation and need. And that complexity of the healthcare system that patients are needing to engage in, where pain is one element, and one important element means that education is absolutely key. And it was lovely to hear the presentation in terms of what's being done on the education and training basis for professionals. Then what we need to understand is what's happening on the other side in terms of patient education and training on both advocacy and wider engagement. And here I'm just going to touch upon a couple of initiatives which the European Patients Forum has been engaged with, and I would say we're by no means the only organisation involved in this, but the need is really substantial. If we know that we have 150 million patients with long-term conditions, and we know that 1 in 5 Europeans, pain is a significant factor impacting on their lives, then we know that the need to be able to get them to be meaningfully involved in the processes that we're engaged with takes quite a lot of energy and effort. One element we do, UPARTI, it's a program, some of you may be aware of it, both the UPARTI program and also the Paradigm program with IMI support. Very important that we've worked with industry, we've worked with the European Commission on these projects. And UPARTI is there to be able to train patients to be able to be involved in the medicine's life cycle, whether that's in the regulatory process, whether that's in clinical trials, whether that's in other aspects. We've talked about all the aspects, those 41 touch points where the patient needs to be and should be engaged, but they need the training and education and support. When Marion was talking about the resource parts of it, also that confidence issue is incredibly important when you're sitting down next to healthcare professionals who are talking about these issues day in and day out. It's important that both the confidence, the energy, the information, the knowledge is there, so patients are able to access their lived experience. And I have to say, whether it's with pain, whether it's with chronic conditions, the fact that they're able and willing to access and make benefit from that shared experience for the betterment of others, I think is very meaningful. So to use programs like that on one hand, and then on the other hand, we also work, I'll give an example of STIPO, which is our youth advocacy training program, bringing in young patients aged 18 to 30 who quite often diagnosed at a very early stage of their lives when they should be thinking about education, they should be thinking about careers, they should be thinking about partners and their future lives. And quite often they're thinking about pain management. Quite often they're thinking about the fact that they really can't fulfill and can't think about lives in the ways that their peers are. And we undertake training to be able to support them. As I say, the confidence part of it, understanding the health systems, the complexities of the health systems, so they're able to, again, meaningfully engage as advocates, meaningfully engage in other ways. So I think what I'm telling you is that the patient perspective and the patient voice is, we're all accepting that it's incredibly important, incredibly meaningful, but we also need to know that it needs investment, it needs resource, it needs support if it's going to be more than, as it was said, the parsley on the turkey. And we know that that's where we want to get to. So we all need to be able to collectively understand that that is quite a stretch to be able to do it, and we all need to collectively engage in doing it. So I was very pleased to be able to be given just this short spot to be able to say that. If there's anything else that colleagues want to pick up on while I'm here or further on with the European Patients Forum, we'd very much like to continue the engagement. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Usman. I think as far as the European Pain Federation is concerned, I think there's a great need for us to engage more with European Patients Forum and with the wider patient community in Brussels. We've got a great relationship with Pain Alliance Europe, and I think there's more we can do to maybe inform some of our projects, whether it's education targeted at medical professionals or maybe awareness raising and educational campaigns targeted at patients and the general public to understand what best practices are out there. Michael, should we have the video first or the Q&A?
We have the video first.
Okay. So we have a MEP, Roberta Metsola from Malta, who sadly couldn't be here today. She's been an MEP since 2013 for the EPP group, and she's been a supporter of SIP since 2016, and a very firm supporter who has spoken at many of our events. And we have a short video from her now.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this year's Societal Impact of Pain Symposium, and well done on 10 years of activities, raising awareness and making so many people's lives better with the work that you all do. The issue of people facing chronic pain is something that I hold close to me, and like many of you here today, a subject that is deeply personal. I am determined to use the platform afforded to me as member of the European Parliament to address the significant barriers that people facing chronic pain have to climb every single day. In the parliamentary term which has just started, I am committed to take our joint work to the next stage, and can also do this as a part of my function as member of the Environment and Health Committee in the Parliament. There is a need for a stronger role of the EU in reducing the impact of chronic pain. And I wholeheartedly endorse your joint statement on the need to address issues related to research, education, employment and data gaps that exist on a European level. We can continue to raise awareness of the impact that pain has on our societies, health and economic systems, and we can do that also by exchanging information and sharing best practices across all member states and learning from one another. This is not an issue that is confined to one state or region. We can see the impact everywhere. 150 million people are affected. And the impact is not only on people's everyday lives and quality of life, although that would be more than enough reason to act, but there is an enormous economic benefit to addressing the impact that chronic pain has. We know that it is prevalent amongst nearly 1 in 5 of Europe's population. We also know that in these cases, pain is associated with the loss of independence and the need for more community support, or even to admission to residential care. High-quality medical research is the key to effectively treating pain, and the European Union must prioritize the issue if it is to ensure high quality of life and an active lifestyle. Medical research and innovation are critical to improve common understanding of the triggers, characteristics and symptoms of chronic pain. Chronic pain is one of the main health-related causes of productivity loss, absenteeism and premature retirement. Now, in times where member states discuss the sustainability of their health and social systems, big gains can be made having a systematic approach to the underlying issues. We should furthermore work together with social partners, payers and providers on a European strategy to address chronic pain. There is need to promote outcome-based healthcare, focusing on quality of life and integration in social and economic life, including, yes, the return to work. There is also the need to better integrate health in other policy areas, in particular employment and social affairs. Finally, let me thank all the stakeholders who organized this event today. Thank you for all that you do, and know that you have an ally in me pushing these issues forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so we won't keep you too long before the lunch break. Michael, do we start with any questions electronically, or shall I kick it off?
I have, if there is no spontaneous question in the auditorium, I have 2 questions. The first one, maybe we can display. What can SIP do to improve pain education and raise awareness among citizens? It's a macro question. I mean, if we can solve this question, I think maybe who wants to give a pretty short answer because of time?
I think maybe Emma would be best placed to start with this one as a member of the Education Committee of EFIC.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Thank you. I think the question that we started this session with as to where we start our education around pain is a really important one. And given that many of our children and our adolescents experience long-term pain, we really do need to start at a younger age thinking about how we integrate pain prevention and pain treatment education at that level. So campaigning and thinking about getting it into school curriculum would be a really important start to educating our community, starting right at the beginning.
That you would like to add?
If I can just add something.
Sure.
You talk about children and I talk about the elderly. And I think for the elderly, I think that's education of the caregivers very often, because a lot of caregivers don't know what to do to evaluate pain in their family, in fact. So that's the other aspect as well. I think to be able to train people to recognize pain, to assess pain, and to just observe the patients as well. Yeah.
So maybe a good segue, and it's a nice post which I would like to show right now. It says, can we display that? Anyways, yeah, here. Europe should establish a minimum of hours at medical faculties dedicated to pain study. And I think there's nothing else we can add, or that's, I think, the minimum.
I think a minimum would be a very good start. It's very difficult to establish what that minimum is, and actually it is about the nature of that education as well, because 12 hours of lectures means very little in terms of retention of knowledge and
sustainability.
And sustainability, yeah. We actually need to minimum standards more around competency. What skills do we want? And then we can empower universities and support universities and professional bodies to actually ensure that our medical faculties then have the flexibility to decide how they meet those minimum standards.
Thank you very much for this comment. Sam?
I had a question, actually. When we're looking at the influence that we'd like to have on healthcare education, medical education, and I said earlier that it's a little bit more difficult than other policy areas because of the way in which it's regulated or influenced. With SIP, in the past few years, we've done many meetings with the European Commission, we've done meetings with national representatives, meetings with regulators. But when it comes to education, there's only so much you can do in Brussels. And I'm wondering whether Giselle and Emma have any recommendations about how we try and influence national programs. You talked about certain regulators that exist. In some cases, you might have to go directly to universities. What have you found out in France and the UK about what works in terms of increasing the amount of hours, increasing the standard of education?
Well, about France, I mean,
Yes,
in France, it was a bit difficult because there was 0 hour on pain education and pain teaching in the medical faculty. And now we've got almost 30 hours, which is a lot compared to what was before. So how we managed to do that, in the universities, we got involved in the boards. And so that meant, I know Bart is the same in Belgium. I mean, that means a lot of hours spending in boards to try to convince that pain should be taught to students. And it works in the end. And we also got this special, as mentioned, this specialized degree. When the doctors have finished, they have this specialized degree. We are still a bit poor on nurses and physiotherapists and other healthcare professionals. But it's coming. And what we've introduced as well for education, which is very important, is to allow patients to come to the university and present themselves and explain to the students what's fibromyalgia, how I suffer, and so on. And I think that was a big point, because a lot of students, they go to the ward every day, and sometimes they finish their degree, and they have never seen a fibromyalgia patient in hospital. So that's just an example. So that's the way, but I think it's put pressure on the Ministry of Health, so that means a bit of political action, and on the other hand, be as well aware of what patients need, in fact, so that we can be the voice of the patients in front of the students.
Thank you very much.
Thank
This is a nice approach to meet the patients early.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. In the UK, the arrangements are slightly different, and the regulators.
Can
of
you take
each-
the microphone a little closer?
Sorry.
Yeah.
The regulators in the UK are actually responsible for setting the standards around education, and then universities then take that and design each individual course. So as many universities are there in the UK are different models that exist. So really we start with the regulators whenever they update their standards. We have a campaign and some advocacy both with patients and professionals to change the standards to ensure that they are written down and so that universities will implement it. But even then there's variation. So we work with individual universities and really it's about having a champion on the ground to make sure that it's in the curriculum.
Maybe one question
One
for,
last question.
for Usman as well. I've noticed in the past few months, maybe this has been going around for a lot longer, but the idea of patient education is not universally accepted. It's not a phrase that is well liked. What is it that maybe organizations like EFIC are not understanding about this, and how better should we phrase our, well, not just our terms, but how should we organize our projects if we're trying to influence the health literacy, let's say, of patients?
It's a good question, Sam, and I don't think there's an easy answer to it, because you know, what I didn't say on either of those training programs I was talking about is that they're running over months. I mean, in terms of calculating the number of hours, you're talking, you know, easily 100 hours that you can do to learn to be able to take what you have as lived experience and to be able to translate that into a meaningful contribution into quite a complicated health and care process. So I think really I just say, making that point that it's not just a matter of just saying, oh right, we can, I don't want to overplay, but we can grab a patient. You can't do that for a whole host of reasons, and we need to be careful, and we need to support it, and we need to be able to resource it. So I think making that main message is the key part of it.
Thank you very much. For the sake of time, I'd say, and lunch is waiting just a few seconds away from now. Thank you very much to the panelists. Thank you, Sam, for your help and your co-moderation.